We're a long way past spring ball and figuring things out. Georgia Tech's got one shot at this.
You are Locked On Georgia Tech, your daily podcast on the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, guys? Welcome into Locked On Georgia Tech. I am one of your hosts, Caleb Johnson. I wasn't smart enough to get into Georgia Tech, but I am smart enough to talk about Georgia Tech sports. A guy alongside me who is taking this daily journey covering the Yellow Jackets with me is Jarvis Davis. He's been covering Atlanta sports for the last 15 years. He's also more than well equipped to talk Georgia Tech sports. I want to start off by saying thank you for making Locked On Georgia Tech your first listen of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. We're free and available wherever you download your podcast and wherever you go to download those podcasts. Make sure you leave us a 5-star review. Anything less than a 5-star review, and I wish you the feelings that everyone had starting the fourth quarter for Georgia Tech against Boston College. You know, just that nervousness that you had of, oh no, is the season going down the toilet? Yeah. If you don't give us a 5-star review, that feeling is, headed your way. I'm sorry. It's just the honest truth. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. Today on the show, we're going to get into Ryan Alpert. Is he here to stay? Is it too, what did Coach Brent Key have to say about his defense following, this tough win against Boston College? But first, Jarvis, is it too late for the Yellow Jackets? Because, man, it feels like there are some glaring issues with this team. And now you've got 2 straight weeks where it's like, if we see these issues again, it feels like the season's a wrap.
Yeah, the season is a wrap if you don't make the necessary adjustments, because what's been happening in these last couple of games is that you have guys just running wide open. And a lot of times I see miscommunication in the defensive backfield. And we thought that those issues were going to be quelled by the return of Amari Bailey, Gilmore, and Savion Riley as well. So all of those guys were coming back into the fold for you to have as an option as a defense coordinator, Blake. But you still had some of those same issues. If you see guys before the ball is snapped and team go in motion and both of them are putting their hands up at each other and they're looking at each other like, yeah, that means they don't know what to do. Yeah. They don't know what the checks are. They don't know to communicate to him like, hey, man, if this guy goes inside, he's my man. If the guy goes outside, that's my man. That's called, hey, understanding what your keys are and whatever coverage that you're playing. So I feel like it's too late to try to get some fire breathers off the edge, right? Like, it's too late. Yeah, recruiting coming up, in a little while. Yeah, you can bring them into the fold, but it's too late to use them now. But what you can do is start to manufacture pressure. And what that means is that, hey, if you need to start sending 5 or 6 guys, and I even went back and looked at the Clemson film, and there were some things that I thought that were pretty interesting. Gideon was even disguised as some coverages. He went to a 4-2-5. He had extra DBE out there, and he was kind of doing show blitzes and all that stuff. All those things that can kind of throw a quarterback off. He threw Clay Klubnik, excuse me. Goodness gracious, can't get that out. And he was coming into the season. He was a Heisman candidate.
Yeah,
kind of, sort of. Yeah, but when you think about, but he's a veteran. He's a guy that's seen a lot of things, and a lot of those looks that Gideon was throwing at him was kind of throwing them off as an offense, and they didn't even get into the end zone until late in the first half. So when you think about it from that aspect, like, you need to get back to that. You need to get back to that. If it's confusing, you're going to face a freshman quarterback, and I know we're going to get into the preview for Pitt a little bit later on in the week, but just kind of taking a little peek into what Georgia Tech is going to be up against, or Gideon is going to be up against, that's a freshman quarterback who can throw the rock. If you give him time, he's going to find an open guy. So you need to start manufacturing some pressure, giving him some different looks, going back to some things that you did early on in the year, because, rushing 4 and not getting any pressure at all, that's not going to work. That has to stop now.
Yeah, and I'm glad you made that point just there, because, like, to the credit of getting healthy was a big part that I thought was going to be a bigger contributor for, the Yellow Jackets against Boston College, with, obviously, as you mentioned, Amari Harvey coming back, Gilmore, and then Savion Riley. Like, those 3 guys were a big part of it. You also was on the defensive line that you got Matthew Alexander. That's who it was. That was trying to think of. So, like, you got healthy on the defensive side of the ball, and I thought that was going to be helpful. Here's the other part that I thought was going to be helpful, Jarvis, which was you had a bye week. Like, you had time to look at film, to prep, to go, hey, here's what we didn't do well against NC State. Let's do it differently against Boston College. And with all of those things coming together, it felt like the clear and obvious issue was not getting any sort of pressure against Boston College, and allowing a freshman, a young quarterback for the Eagles, look like he was who Cade Klubnik was supposed to be this season, a guy competing for a Heisman. And so I guess, like, what ways does Blake Gideon have to try to create pressure against Pitt?
I think, like I mentioned, you have to send more than 4. You have to outnumber, because essentially a pressure is you sending more people than they have blocking, or a blitz. A blitz is you send more people than they have blocking. If you send 5 and they have, you have 5 offensive linemen, that's not a blitz. So if you have to send 6 if they're holding 5 guys to block. So it's just it's a chess match. It's a tendency piece. You have to look at, okay, when it comes to 3rd and long, what formations do they normally like to run? When they're in 2nd and long, what do they normally like to run? When they're in 2nd and short, what do they normally like to run? So I think that being able to throw more people at them than they have blocking, like, that's going to have to be, it sounds really simple. And to be honest with you, that's going to be the key for them. Keep it simple, man. Like, if you're trying to throw all these exotic different coverages and stuff like that, man, just play man. Play man. Hey, we're going to lock up. We're going to put our hands on these guys. We're going to be aggressive. We're not going to sit back and just play this soft coverage and allow these guys to run these little 10-yard stop routes or comeback routes and turn around and break the tackle and go take it to the house and break the line of scrimmage for 67 yards or 57 yards, and allow guys to break records and career passing records and all that stuff. As you can see, I'm still a little touched by what I saw on Saturday. Caleb, I don't know if you noticed or not, but I think that I don't like looking at stuff like that, because it says to me, it says that when you show the same thing in back-to-back weeks, we talked about how, Boston College was an awful offense. Awful. They weren't a good running football team. They knew that they thought your pass defense was so bad. The run defense, we know, Georgia Tech run defense hasn't been that great. So if you thinking about it from a simple standpoint, you thinking about coming to the game, you're saying, okay, all right, we're going to try to take advantage of this soft run defense. They can't set the edge. We can get outside. We can do all that. We're going to try to do all of this. Man, Boston College came in there throwing that ball because they figured, hey, we could take advantage of that. We like our skilled guys versus your skilled guys. And that's what they did. They took advantage of you. Dylan Lonergan looked like a capable quarterback. We're talking about a guy that got benched a few games ago. During the middle of the season, he got benched. And he out here giving hope. Your defense out here giving hope to the Boston College faithful. that they got that quarterback of the future. So for me, I feel like Gideon has to simplify things. Keep it simple, man. You have to simplify this thing because like when you start getting into all these different coverages and all these different rules and all right, what happens? This guy, they motion the trips. Is it off? Or are we changing to man? Are we clamping down? Or what is it cloud? Is it cover 3? What we doing? So all these things are going through these guys' heads when the offense does something that they're not necessarily used to seeing. So in order to quell that, in order to change those feelings that these guys are having pre-snap, keep it simple, man. All right, we're going to play man. We're going to lock up. We're going to play safeties over the top. Cool. And if we don't get there rushing forward, at some point, we're going to try to catch them off guard and throw 6 at them. And guess what we're going to do? We're going to play man behind it.
Yeah. And I think it's playing man specifically, too, for me in the red zone where, I know Georgia Tech fans don't. Yep. I know Tech fans don't like the guy who was leading the team up 316. However, I found it very interesting earlier this season. Someone asked him essentially about, because he's got some freshmen guys who were playing cornerback for them, and they asked him about a particular freshman giving up a pass interference call in the red zone, and his philosophy was, hey, when my guys are playing man, they might give up a pass interference call. They're not going to give up a touchdown. If we're playing zone, they're going to give up a touchdown. And I thought, how fitting, especially in a game like you played against Boston College, where Dylan Lonergan 4 for 4 in the red zone against this Georgia Tech defense. I want to read to you a quote, Jarvis, from Tech defensive tackle Jordan Vandenburg, who is obviously a leader on this team and had some really positive things to say about Blake Gideon. I'm just wondering if the messaging that is being given out is actually translating to the field, because Vandenburg said, we've got a ton of faith in Coach Gideon. We know that he's going to push us to be in the position to make the play, and we've just got to go out there and execute. We know if I just do my job and my brother does his job, so on and so forth, everyone just needs to do their job. No one has to do anything extraordinary to win the game. And I agree with that sentiment of, like you were just saying, keeping it simple. However, I think the part that I kind of scratch my head at is we know he's going to put us in the position to make the play. The very thing that we're talking about is I don't know that these guys are being put in the position to make the correct plays when, to your very point, guys are straight up looking confused. I don't, like Jarvis, I know what this hand symbol means. Universal.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. Like, my 5-year-old knows what that means. Daddy, he don't know what he doing. That's just a simple fact. And I expect Jordan to say stuff like that, right? He's a redshirt senior, lead on his team. I get it. He's going to say that. He's supposed to say that. But here's the thing. These are 18 to 25-year-olds, right? I'm the coach. I'm in charge. So if I know that these guys are getting confused in certain things and certain aspects of my defense and what I want to call, as a coach, I need to make the necessary adjustments because I need to understand that I can't run that. You have to, as a coach, you have to be able to say that. You have to be able to admit that, you know what? I can't run that with this group. I know I want to, but I can't. So you have to make the adjustment. You can't put that on the players and say, oh, we got to execute better. No, it don't work like that. Not in college. And you change it. You adjust to what they do well. And that's on you as a coach to be able to figure it out.
Yeah. No personnel. We heard from Jordan Vandenburg. Let's next hear from what Brent Key had to say about his defense. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, maybe you're a Hawks fan and you're keeping up with just the incredible performance that Jalen Johnson has been playing lately, and you want to get in on the bets. FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Yeah, like that Hawks fourth quarter comeback against the Suns. They were down 22 points and then ended up pulling out a win. I mean, you could have made some money on that if you were betting with FanDuel. You can combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Right now, FanDuel's giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Jarvis, I feel like Brent Key and all of his post-game interactions following this Boston College win were incredibly awkward. Like, that man was so unhappy with his team, clearly. And it was funny because the sideline reporter, I'm blanking on her name at the moment, but she said at one point, like, you can smile now, you won the game. And essentially, Key was like, yeah, go Jackets. And it was, and I thought to myself, maybe I doesn't want to smile right now.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
we talked about on a previous show, a win being a win, and like, sure, yes, you won the game, and that's great. And at least you're not having to talk about your season being over and dealing with a loss. However, Brent Key also, talking about the struggles of this game, essentially, he pointed to his defense without pointing to his defense, which I think, for a head coach who is not going to throw anyone under the bus, he understands the struggles that this team is experiencing right now. He said specifically, we had 2 performances in a row that we did not do a good job in certain areas. But this one, we got to win out of it. We got to take the good. We got to take the bad. We got to continue to do things well and improve the things that we're not. Yes, there were some issues on offense. We spoke briefly about that, especially in the red zone, but certain areas certainly feel, Jarvis, like he's talking about this defense.
Yeah, I mean, all areas. Pass against the pass, against the run. One element of our team, 1 out of 3, the goal is to win 2 out of 3. They won 2 out of 3, special teams and offense.
They did.
They lost that defense badly. But it's a fine line that you have to walk as a head coach. I'm sure, just from you can't specifically call them out, but he called them out. I can read into that. And he even said it, during the bye when he was talking about, laying out what they were going to be working on and talking about, the defense side of the football and, being better against the run and setting the edge and having to really be strong at the point of attack as a defensive lineman. And then, what I brought up earlier about, the cut from a coverage standpoint, like being strong at the point of attack up front and then being soft on the back end of the defense, that don't match. So if you're going to be better up front by getting your hands on offensive linemen and getting to those guys' chests and shedding those blocks, and there was only a few times that I actually saw that. Jordan Vandenburg and the Kilo Stone, were some guys who made some plays. Stone was able to get home and put Dylan Lonergan on the ground. Those are some of the things that you saw from time to time, but you need more of that, and you need more guys doing that. So I feel like Coach Key has to say those things. He has to say there are some things that we have to do better. And there are some areas that we have to get better in because he knows what's at stake. He know what time it is when on Saturday, hey, this is to get in the dance, essentially, right? Like the first dance is kind of like the little spring dance, or the fall dance, back to school dance, the ACC championship. And then guess what? In the spring, it's the prom, baby. It's the big dog, college football playoffs. So what you gonna do? you have to get better. You have to make those adjustments. He has to go meet with Blake Gideon saying, hey, man, let's talk about what's working and what's not working. Get rid of it. Stop running it because we just don't have the personnel to do it. Like great coaches, they adjust their system or scheme to their personnel. Like the butthead coaches and coaches who end up getting fired, they try to run their scheme regardless of who they have from a personnel standpoint. So yeah, it's nut cutting time, man. Like they have to get this thing right.
Yeah, I'm also curious from this element too, Jarvis, which is not to make a comparison necessarily to the Atlanta Falcons, a team that you also cover. But the Falcons.
So why you got to bring this show down?
I'm just look. I try to pull from
we
things
talk about
that
a winning
people
football
can
team
relate
here. Why
to.
you got to bring them in this? But go ahead.
You have a first-time play caller on the defensive side of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
How big of a factor do you think it is for a guy like Gideon, comes over from Texas, to step into that role, and especially to step into that role as a first-time play caller when your head coach isn't a defensive-minded coach and can maybe be there to support you?
Ooh, man, you said something then. When I look at the offensive side of football, Buster Faulkner, he's quarterback in college, successful quarterback in college. I experienced going up against that success at Valdosta State. I went to Albany State, and we played against each other. It was the first game of every year in my career when I was down there. And I remember Buster vividly. I remember Dusty Bonner, who was down there at quarterback as well. You know, Adrian, Fabian Walker, who was a quarterback my senior year. We spanked him, you know what I'm saying? But Buster had a lot of success down there playing the quarterback position. Reason why I bring that up is you talk about that experience. Quarterbacks have to know the offense. They have to know it like the back of their hand. They understand calling plays because they have to call a play in the huddle. It's just that familiarity that you have. And then you have Brent Key, who was an OC at UCF, if I remember correctly. So when you have that continuity, that veteran type vibes on that side of the football, you can't then bring in a guy who's a first timer, especially when you don't really have the guys that you would like to have in order to compete for national championships. And this is not something that I'm saying. Brent Key says he wants to compete for national championships. He's just not here for conference championship. Those are his words. So in order to compete for national championships, you got to have the dudes up front specifically. That's where it starts. Like, I can give me some dudes up front, and we'll figure out on the back end of defense. like look, we'll just play man and rush forward, because when you got those guys bringing their heat up front, that's going to be a difference maker for you. So, I'm not gonna say I question the hire, because we just got here. I don't want to start doing that.
Right? Yeah.
Like I said, man, I don't want to start doing that.
Calling for nobody's job.
No, I'm not calling for anybody's job. That's not my style. I don't get down like that. But when you look at from the experience factor and the personnel that you're going to be dealing with coming in, I don't know if I would have probably gone with a guy who has a little bit more experience calling plays. So, but here we are. Is it too late to make a change? No, you can make a change. You just have to adjust. And I think that Key is a head coach for a reason. So he's going to have to get with his guys and say, hey, man, let's lay it all out on the table. What's working? What's not working? Get rid of what's not working, and let's simplify things for these guys so we can play some sound defense. If we got to play two coverages for most of the game and make it look a different way for 60 plays, that's what we're going to have to do. Because guess what? If you can play those two coverages really, 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 really good, you can potentially figure it out against a team like Pitt. If you get into the college football playoff, might be a different story. You might have to do, like, really get creative. But
Yeah.
you get there when you get there. But now it's all about figuring out how you can beat a team like Pitt.
Well, all of these decisions come from the top, come from the athletic director who guides the direction of this team. And is Ryan Alpert here to stay? All right, Jarvis, we got some interesting news. And because it is the world of college football, it's not something that happened necessarily recently, but athletic director Ryan Alpert signed a new extension in July. But
breaking news.
Yeah, and it is worth explaining to people because the Freedom of Information Act that we have, reporters can request these records and get them in. And Chad Bishop, who does an incredible job over at the AJC covering the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, recently discovered that Ryan Alpert back in July signed a 5-year extension. Is this something that you think is a positive for this team?
Yeah, continuity is always great. I kind of want to make a comparison to the NFL. General manager, head coach. The general manager makes all the decisions, and financially, and if Brent Key needs a couple $100,000 more for a defensive lineman, that's a 5-star, and he wants to come to Tech, got some good grades, he can get into Tech and all that stuff. Guess what we're going to? Hey, Ryan, you make a phone call.
Right.
You see, that what is that? The $100 million thing that you fundraise you trying to get for the athletic department to compete for championships. That one. Yeah. Hey, call them folks and say, hey, we need a little bit more change because we're trying to get some people in here. That's how this works. So when those guys have a good relationship, every time I see them together, they're always smiling. So from my understanding, they have a really good relationship, and that's what you want. You want that continuity. You want to know that each other are going to be around for some time. And so I feel like it just makes sense. This is one of those instances where it just makes a lot of sense to, get those guys who are familiar with you and know that they're going to be around for some time.
Yeah, I think from the president on down, like this has got to be something where if you want to be competing for those national championships, then you don't want to have your athletic director with his eyes out looking other places. You don't want your head coach with his eyes out
Sorry.
looking other places, like you don't want that. And I think Jarvis has been really interesting where you lost an athletic director and that could have been crippling to your to the direction of this athletic department.
Sure.
Ryan Alpert steps in, he comes over from Tennessee, and handles this role clearly in a very positive way because Brent Key doesn't say, slice me open and see what colors I bleed if he's not on the same page as Ryan Alpert. If this is a guy who, maybe wasn't taking the university in the direction that Brent thought was best, hey, he would go be looking at, the Penn State or the Auburn or the Florida State that'll probably open up, like all of those sorts of things would then still very much be on the table. And I think for Brent Key to have the confidence that he does, it was interesting. I judge a man by the decisions that he makes, especially early on in his career. And for Ryan Alpert, he's done things like, okay, we're making the Georgia Tech Tennessee a home and home. We're going to play it at Bobby Dodd for our fans. What is he doing Saturday night for the Pitt game that's going to be played under the lights? He says, hey, all of my season ticket holders, 2 extra tickets. You get 2 extra tickets to go fill this place up and make it as loud and electric as it possibly can. That feels like a guy who has some vision and who wants to build something here with Brent Key.
Yeah, we've had conversations on this show about building a community. Like you only build a community if you have vision. And like you just laid out, understanding what getting the fans involved. Like he reached out to the season ticket holders and said, hey, do you all want to have this home game at Mercedes-Benz against Tennessee, or do you want to play it at Bobby Dodd? And the majority said, we want to have it at Bobby Dodd. And guess what? That's what happened. Those are the type of things that people remember, people understand it, and they gravitate towards. So when because sometimes like when you hear these extensions come out, you hear people saying, "Oh man, oh gosh, he's gonna be around for oh my gosh, why are they signing this dude for this long?" But you don't hear that. You hear it's like, oh, you hear a guy that wants to hear from you. He wants to hear from you. He wants to understand what are your thoughts and feels about this. Like, do you want all the home games to be at the Dodd? Like, yeah, absolutely. So when you look at it from that standpoint, like that's what it's all about when you're talking about building a foundation for something that can last for as long as he's around and when he leaves as well.
Yeah, I think this is the perfect kind of setup for, like, you wouldn't think of an athletic director signing an extension being something that affects recruiting, but that having that consistency in knowing who's going to be around, who's going to be the decision makers, and having those decision makers in Alpert and Brent Key be guys that you trust and that you want to build a program, a real contending program. And then, yeah, that's something that I want to join, rather than coming to a university that just hired a new athletic director again, that just hired a new head coach because the previous one went on to take some better opportunity.
The
Like
Florida or the LSU job,
Right. Yeah. The governor isn't stepping in at Georgia Tech to make, decisions. Like Brian's going to stick to his job.
Yeah.
But that can't be said for other universities, in the South, quite honestly. And so I think that's part of it. Yes, as much as kids want the bag, they want the NIL money. They want to make it to the league. They also want to know the program that they're stepping into isn't volatile and going to see a bunch of change. And I think, it's a really good sign for Georgia Tech that Ryan Alpert, at least here, seemingly for the next 5 years, but probably further than that, especially if he and Brent Key are able to build something with this football team. All right, Jarvis, that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Georgia Tech. Tomorrow, we're going to get into the college football playoff rankings. Where does Georgia Tech end up in that? I already feel my blood pressure rising because I just know. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and anywhere you listen to podcasts for free. Follow the show on social media, as well as Jarvis and I. Jarvis is at JarvisD90. I'm at ATL Johnson 18. Thanks for making Locked On Georgia Tech your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On ACC. Kenton Gibbs and Alex Donna break down the most interesting conference in college sports, from the rivalries to the championship and every game in between. Find Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. For Locked On Georgia Tech, y'all have a good one.